Promote to private. Now you are here.
Now he's sir. He's here, no? Sir, has joined, no?
He has joined. He has joined.
Yeah.
नमस्कार
नमस्कार नमस्कार
नमस्कार नमस्कार पीना बाब कैसे हैं बाब
First class, sir. Good, sir. Good, sir.
Sir, with kind permission, sir, let's start, sir.
Shall I begin then?
Sir, I have
Oh, acha, okay. As you say.
Raghu, mute karo. No, I missed. Start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar hosted by Indian Law and Justice Foundation in association with Alliance Legal. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time and being here today. I am Durga Dutt, Advocate on Record, Supreme Court of India. Today we are presenting this webinar on access to justice to the common people and role of bar in times of COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, I would like to introduce the eminent speakers of the webinar. Our keynote speaker is Justice S.N. Jha, retired, the former Chief Justice of the High Courts of Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir. Justice Jha has also served as President of SISTAT, that is Customs, Excise and Service Tax Appellate Tribunal, where he resigned and later on he joined as a chairperson of the Bihar State Human Rights Commission. At present, Sir is practicing as a senior advocate before Supreme Court of India. Sir, I welcome you to the present webinar. Our next speaker is Mr. Rakesh Kumar Khanna, senior advocate, Supreme Court of India and member of the Supreme Court Legal Services Authority. Sir has served as an Additional Solicitor General of India, and he was also elected as the President, Supreme Court Bar Association. Sir, I welcome you. Our last speaker is Colonel R. Balasubramaniam, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. And I wish to share something about Colonel Bala, sir. He has had a very unique experience of life as he has served in the Indian Army before joining this legal profession. Sir joined the Indian Army as Army Judge Advocate General's Department. He was also awarded as Visis Seva Medal in 2006 by the President of India. He also played as a first-class cricketer for services in Ranji Trophy tournament. I also welcome you, sir. Now I invite my colleague, Mr. Upendra Narayan Mishra, Advocate Supreme Court and Member Executive, Supreme Court Bar Association, to say a few words about the topic. Over to Mr. Mishra.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Access to justice or right to justice is part and parcel of right to life and for a democratic country like India. It is utmost important. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has severely affected all the sectors, including judicial system, that is the justice delivery system. The present corona crisis has resulted in closure of courts, reduced functioning of courts, and has heavily contributed to backlog of cases. Due to closure, limited functioning of courts, one needs to ponder about access to justice to common people in the times of COVID-19. During normal functioning of courts, access to justice is a much discussed concern for common people and weaker sections of society. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought new challenges before the Indian judiciary, as it has to make itself accessible to all the sections of society equally, irrespective of any sort of discrimination. Access to justice is of greatest concern during the present time because a steady rise in crime rate has been witnessed since announcement of lockdown. Access to justice can never be limited, suspended, delayed, or denied. Every individual has equal opportunity to knock the doors of judicial system as and when need arises, irrespective of any difficulty or limitation. The role of bar and bar associations are most important in justice delivery system, especially the common people, the needy, and the like. Indian courts are adopting a new virtual legal system, but its uniform application, implementation is the most important challenge. My colleague, Mr. Priyanshu Upadhyay, to moderate this webinar and proceed further.
Thank you, Upendra sir, for giving an introduction about the theme of today's webinar. Without wasting much time, I take the honor to invite the first speaker for today's webinar. I invite Mr. Justice S.N. Jha, retired Chief Justice, High Court of Rajasthan and Jammu Kashmir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Upadhyay. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, good. So normally when we attend such meetings, then we see the audience, we see who are sitting on the dais, and then we begin by addressing the participants. But that's not the situation here. So, so we have to change, we adjust with these times. So nevertheless, I give my greetings to Mr. Rakesh Khanna, Colonel Balasubramaniam, also to Mr. Karunakar Mahalik, Mr. Priyanshu Upadhyay, Mr. Drugadat, and of course, not the list, Mr. Upendra Mishra, and then the audience. First of all, I must compliment Mr. Drugadat for conceiving this idea of holding this webinar on a very contemporary topic, which is of seminal importance today, and organizing this function, this event. And also must thank him for giving me the opportunity to say a few words to you. It is undeniable that everybody has a right to justice. As a matter of fact, in India, under Article 32 of the Constitution, the right to move the Supreme Court for enforcement of fundamental rights is itself a fundamental right. That's a unique situation where right to redressal of legal remedies is a fundamental right. It's nowhere to be found in the world. I also like to draw attention, so far as the topic is concerned, to Article 39, capital A, which was inserted in 1977 by amendment, that provides that states shall secure that the operation of the legal system promotes justice, and further it says, shall ensure that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. So it is a directive, it is not a fundamental right, it's a part of the directive principles under part 4. Nevertheless, it embodies the intention of the parliament that we have to evolve a system which secures justice, equal justice to all concerned irrespective of the adversities. But these are the general features. Today we have assembled to discuss the issue of access to justice delivery system in the context of a pandemic which has turned our life upside down. It's a pandemic, it's not endemic. Endemic is something which is confined to a locality, to a place or group of persons. Pandemic is something which is spreads down the world. So it's a pandemic. And the world has now to cope with this situation, the world has adopted to the scenario, and economic activities in the corporate world are being conducted from home with the aid of apps like Skype, Zoom, Microsoft, etc. Now, in India, in the prevailing circumstances, since March of this year, we are supposed, like other countries, like other places around the world, we are supposed to follow what has come to be called social distancing, and further to minimize our physical contacts. Now, in this situation, the courts are being constrained to suspend their regular court hearings in open court and to restrict the court functioning to virtual courts. These are new words which are being coined. Pandemic, nobody had heard of pandemics. Nobody knew about today. Whatever whenever we discuss COVID and Corona and immunity and all that. So these are the things which we are facing at the moment. So even though the courts are not holding regular sitting, urgent matters are being taken up and adjudicated via video conferencing from virtual courtrooms. To an extent, it is not a new procedure. Production of accused, remand of accused persons, recording of statements and evidence in criminal cases is a rather common thing. It is coming on for so many years. So they are not done in physical court, they are done by video conferencing. But virtual courts or virtual hearing through video conferencing are not substitute of physical courts or regular hearing in open courtrooms. The principle underlying open court is that justice should not only be done, but should manifestly seem to be done. It's crucial to maintaining public confidence in the administration of justice. Therefore, not only the concerned litigant, but third parties also should have the right to see, hear, and watch the proceedings. I'm reminded of a case which was decided in 1966, reported in 1967, AIR 1967, Supreme Court, page 1. The case of Naresh Sridhar Miraskar versus State of Maharashtra, headed by 9 judges of Supreme Court. The background of the case was that the court had passed an order prohibiting publication of the evidence of the witnesses in newspapers. This was challenged, and the Supreme Court held that all cases brought before the courts, whether civil, criminal, or otherwise, must be heard in open court, and did not approve of the improved order prohibiting publication. In this connection, I would like to refer to Section 327 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. Section 327 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, CRPC, provides that the place in which any criminal court is held for the purpose of inquiring into or trying into offence shall be deemed to be an open court to which the public generally may have access so far as the same can be conveniently contain them. Of course, the presiding judge or the magistrate has the power at any stage of the inquiry or trial to direct that public generally or any particular person should not have access to, but that's only an exception. Similar provision is contained in section 157, if I remember the time, 157 of the Civil Procedure Code. This came by amendment in 1977. The same language is employed. The place in which any civil court is held for the purpose of trial of any suit shall be deemed to be an open court to which the public generally may have access so far as the same can conveniently contain them. Same thing. Similar proviso is there. 145(4) of the Constitution of India also says that the Supreme Court shall pronounce its judgment in open court. A similar thing is said about the references under 143. Therefore, the courts, the statutes do talk about open courts. Now, what is the meaning of open court in Black's Law Dictionary? The term is defined to mean a court to which public have a right to be admitted. Sorry, a court to which a public have right to be admitted. A matter came before Supreme Court in the case of Swapnil Tripathi, and the issue was related to live streaming of court's proceedings. The court held that access to justice can never be complete without the litigant being able to see, hear, and understand the course of the proceedings firsthand. Live streaming is an important facet of a responsive judiciary. These are the wise words of wisdom coming from the Supreme Court. But all said, all said, the law is a dynamic concept, and while applying the same in a particular situation, it may have to be tempered to suit the situation. As Chief Justice of England said, in the context while dealing with the present scenario, we have an obligation to continue with the work of the courts as a vital public service, just as others in public sector and the private sector are doing. Problems and complaints relating to the virtual courts and the virtual hearing, they rise from the fact that the infrastructure is inadequate. There are glitches in the virtual. So far, mentioning of cases for urgent hearing are concerned. Staff and the advocates at large are not adequately well trained. But these are things which can be remedied with the passage of virtual court system has also certain advantages. Everything has some attending advantage. Excuse me. That everything in this world has some advantages, certain disadvantages. And when we consider the feasibility of any institution, then we have to take into account the prevailing circumstances. The virtual courts has also certain advantage. Everything has, it is cheap, it is accessible to the public at large. In fact, some enthusiasts and policymakers have been advocating that the system of virtual court hearing and video conferencing should continue even after this this phase is over, so that to provide access to the justice for litigants in far-flung areas. I had opportunity to appear for virtual hearing on 2-3 days in Supreme Court, of course, from my residence, and I found that the hearing was quite focused, unlike the regular hearings. The judges were all mindful, so I did not find any problem with the virtual hearing. So, because of the circumstances, because the lives of the people cannot be compromised, so there cannot be a free access. So some methodology has to be evolved. Like, so there has to be a mix. According to me, there should be some mix of the virtual court hearing and the regular hearing. So we cannot, as I said earlier, the virtual courts are not substitute of the open courts. So the virtual, we have to come back to the court system, and hopefully after the pandemic is over, we should be doing away with this. But then it deserves serious consideration as to whether we should continue with the virtual hearing in some cases in which both parties mutually agree. So where parties agree, then one or two benches can be earmarked for virtual hearing only. And just like with the district courts, we have permanent Lok Adalats, which every day they take up matters which are referred to them. They refer to it for settlement for this adjudication. So like that, benches can be earmarked for a virtual hearing, and of course with the considered parties. But it's not a bad thing. And so far as the present scenario is concerned, there are constraints, and I have grave doubts if the open court hearing is can be resorted to in the present scenario. Of course, market is opening, economy is opening, the schools, college institutions are opening. So like that, the courts also have to open. But then it has to be restricted. It cannot be a free run of the advocates, the litigants, and their staff. There has to be the restriction. So these are things which have to be worked out, and I hope the association and the courts, the advocates body and the courts, the judges will sit together and take a holistic decision so that the courts proceedings are held as much as possible in open court, and but so therefore, so far as the as a principle, the open there cannot two opinions that there should be open court and open court hearing, but in a given situation, a compromise has to be worked out, and of course this is something which has to be done with the consent of both bar and the bench. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such a stimulating and informative speech. We all will remember that it is a pandemic and not an endemic. Being a part of the bench as well as bar, you have given your valuable insights on the concept of open court and its relevance for access to justice. You have also shared your views on the prevailing conditions and access to justice to common people in the present time. Sir, your speech has been very insightful, knowledgeable, and profound. I now take the honor to invite Mr. Rakesh Kumar Khanna, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Sir, I request you to enlighten us with your views and insights. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Justice S.N. Jha, former Chief Justice of Rajasthan High Court and Jammu and Kashmir High Court, and former chairman of the Bihar State Human Rights Commission. My esteemed colleague and brother, Colonel R. Balasubramaniam, Senior Advocate and Senior Executive Member of the Supreme Court Bar Association. Shri Durgadatji, Advocate on Record. Dear Priyanshu Upadhyay, Karunakar Mahale, and of course the spirit behind the webinar, Mr. Upendra Narayan Mishra, Advocate and Member Executive of the Supreme Court Bar Association. It's indeed, I'm grateful to the organizers for inviting me to speak on this topic. And I'm told that I have to specifically deal with the problems which the brother and sister lawyers are facing. Let me also address all the brother and sister participants in this webinar. Friends, today mankind is facing an unprecedented pandemic situation of which the whole world is severely affected. This unprecedented situation has seen an unprecedented lockdown for a period of more than now 3 months. All economic activities, all court functionings, and all activities had virtually come to an halt for almost now 3 months. Because of this pandemic, the courts have not been able to perform their normal functioning, which has severely affected all the advocates practicing before all courts alike. The situation has been sorted to be dealt with by conducting virtual hearings. Of course, virtual hearings are being conducted in urgent matters, but that is no answer to the normal functioning of the court. Because of the lack of normal functioning, almost all the advocates are severely affected, economically, psychologically, and otherwise also. The situation is really severe and grave. Many of our colleagues, especially in the high courts and trial courts, as well as many of our colleagues in the Supreme Court, are also very badly affected financially and economically. The Bar Association of the Supreme Court, SCORA, Bar Councils, they had tried to come out with some economic solutions by lending helping hand to our colleagues who are in dire need. But in my respectful submission, this is not a long-term solution. As is being said now, the corona time is likely to prevail for some time now. Maybe some months, maybe a year or so, or maybe more. Faced with this kind of situation and faced with this kind of unprecedented situation, we have to think of solution both in terms of the functionings of the court as well as the financial and economic status of our brother and sister colleagues. Last year, when I was president of the Supreme Court Bar, Upendra Narayan Mishra ji happened to be one of the member executive in my committee. We all worked out a social security scheme, and we wrote to Honorable the Prime Minister of India and all the chief ministers of all the states, unfolding the social security scheme for the lawyers. We proposed that the Advocates Welfare Fund Act should be modified, and we proposed that we all advocates may contribute maybe 100 rupees or 200 rupees per case. There may be a cap for being member of this welfare scheme, social security scheme, and in that, let us presume we put a minimum of 20 cases. When I obtained the data from the Supreme Court and Delhi High Court, I could see that the number of cases being filed and number of cases in which we all are appearing leads us to a situation where on an average, on a contribution of say rupees 100 per filing and rupees 200 for appearing counsel or senior counsels, there may be a huge amount which may come to the coffers. I also proposed in this scheme that whatever will be the contribution by the lawyers, equal amount which should be contributed by the state governments and equal amount should be contributed by the central government. Therefore, if suppose for a minimum of 20 appearances or 20 filings, a lawyer's contribution comes to say 4,000 rupees, the amount per lawyer with the contribution of the state government and central government will come to about 12,000 rupees per annum. What I proposed was, under this social security scheme, the government should provide each lawyer with life insurance of approximately 10 to 20 lakhs, health insurance or mediclaim policies, or they may be provided free treatment under the central government health scheme or the state government health schemes. Furthermore, I also proposed in that in the case of a lawyer meeting an accident or due to some disease, he is unable to attend to his work, in that event also he should be given monthly compensation for his practice. And last but not the least, I proposed that out of this fund, if a lawyer survives, say, and he is ready to leave the practice, say at the age of 65 or 70 years, in that event, upon his leaving the practice, he should be paid handsome pension per month from this fund. In this way, all the three aspects of one's life, that is the life insurance, healthcare, and the pension, all the three aspects of a person's life are secured. This is what I feel that even today we need to immediately promulgate, and we must enforce this kind of a scheme in which a lawyer, as a matter of right, will be entitled to get his life insured, health insured, as well as he is in this kind of unprecedented situation is able to get money from the fund and sustain honorably. I'm happy to inform all of you that the Delhi government had accepted partly this social security scheme, and in the last year's budget as well as this year's budget, Delhi government has allocated 50 crore rupees towards the social security. They have named it as Chief Minister's Advocate Welfare Fund. Out of this 50 crore, the Delhi government appointed a committee of which I happen to be the chairman. A 13-member committee was appointed, and in December, we submitted a report in which we had recommended that out of this 50 crores, every lawyer who is enrolled with the Delhi Bar Council and who is verified should be given life insurance of rupees 5 lakhs and health insurance, health mediclaim of rupees 5 lakh for the family of the lawyer. Besides this, the Delhi government, we also recommended that each bar association should be provided at least 20 computers e-library and a room where our sister colleagues can utilize as a crutch. All these have been accepted by the Delhi government, and recently the Delhi government has called for the registration, and 30,000 lawyers from Delhi have been registered for this scheme. The scheme is almost at the verge of being implemented. The tender for the life insurance and the mediclaim policies has been issued, and very soon all the lawyers in Delhi enrolled with Delhi Bar Council will get the benefit of this social security scheme. So in my respectful submission, it is high time that the social security scheme in which each one of us contribute is implemented and a fund is created either with the bar associations or the bar councils of the respective states, from which a lawyer, as a matter of right, will be entitled to get financial support in the times of crisis like the present pandemic. This is my suggestion insofar as dealing with the financial problem during the period of the COVID is concerned. Now, coming to the situation that is obtaining how to provide access to the clients as well as the lawyers, my suggestion, in addition to what my Justice Jha has said, my suggestion would be that the bar associations of each court, like in Supreme Court, the Supreme Court Bar Association can provide rooms for virtual court hearings in which they can provide the requisite technical support and a technical man to assist the lawyers and the clients. From these rooms, the lawyers can address their arguments to the court, and their clients can also participate along with the lawyers and see the court proceedings along with the lawyers. At the time of hearing, the clients will therefore be able to assist the lawyer even on the facts of the case. This facility is still lacking since as of now we are doing virtual court hearings, and one of the problems which many of the lawyers are facing who are not well acquainted with the technology, they are not able to handle the court hearing properly, and their clients are not able to participate in the court hearing, which is creating sort of suspicion in the mind of the client whether my advocate has performed or not performed. So these virtual court hearing rooms provided by the bar associations within the court premises or in the chamber blocks of the Supreme Court or High Courts or the courts, other courts, will definitely come to the aid of not only the lawyers in discharging their court functioning, but also instill confidence in the mind of their clients, who will be able to participate in these proceedings and will be able to instruct their counsels at the time of the hearing. These are some of my suggestions. Once again, I thank the organizers for giving me opportunity to address my fellow colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for an enlightening and informative speech. Being an active and senior member of BAR, you have given a valuable insight on the role of BAR during the present stressful time. Sir, you have profoundly dealt with the methods or mechanisms which can be adopted by the BAR and different organizations for getting out from the present pandemic and for protecting the rights and interests of the practicing advocates, especially in the form of social security schemes. Your views and suggestions would surely motivate the members of BAR, especially the young litigants. Thank you, sir. I now take the honor to invite our last guest for today's webinar, Colonel R. Balasubramanian, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, viewers. Honorable Justice Jha, my dear senior colleague, Mr. Rakesh Khanna, Senior Advocate, Mr. Durgadar, Mr. Karunakar, Mr. Upendra Narayan Mishra, and friend Upadhyay, a very warm and good evening to all of you. The topic access to justice in times of COVID and how the litigants in fact have to be helped. The theme of actually today's discussion is of course contextual and contemporaneous with what we are facing. The honorable speakers who have just now actually given their thought process have no doubt told about as to what is to be done and what is the way out. One thing I feel that we are stuck with COVID-19 and we are stuck with technology both. This technology is going to remain forever now. We can't wish it away. Having said that, the first phrase of today's topic, access to justice. Justice Jha, in fact, very clearly said it is part of the fundamental right. It's part of Article 14, it is part of Article 19, 21. And if there is a violation, definitely we can actually exercise our right to enforce the fundamental right under Article 32 and 226. All these things, absolutely no doubt about this legal position. In fact, access to justice is one of the inalienable rights of any citizen. Leave alone citizen, even a non-citizen also under Article 14, in times of crisis, has got right to access to justice. That being the position, the fundamental right to have access to justice as part of Article 21 has been recognized even very recently by the Honorable Supreme Court in one of the judgments comprising of the Honorable Chief Justice, Justice Thakur, the then Chief Justice of India, sitting with 4 more judges in a constitution bench while dealing with the problem of transfer of cases from Jammu and Kashmir to the rest of the country. A very elaborate and detailed judgment was given, which is reported, of course, in 2016 8 SCC 510. Now, the honorable judges touched upon Article 14, Article 19, 21, and of course 32, and with a reference to Article 145 and also Article 39A. Having covered all these aspects, they said that there are 4 fundamental things which are actually very important insofar as access to justice is concerned. One, that is a machinery which is effectual. That is the first criteria for having access to justice. When the court said effective machinery, what they meant, whether it is a court, whether it is a tribunal, whether it is an authority, it should be effective. The person who approaches the court should have a sense of feeling and satisfaction that the hearing was effective. This is the first hallmark of access to justice. So therefore, the procedure which is actually contemplated ought to be fair and also ought to be fair to both the parties and also, more importantly, fair to the litigant actually who is actually before the court. So therefore, fairness in procedure in not only ensuring an effective hearing, but an effective machinery of adjudication is very important. So therefore, we can ask a question to ourselves. Instead of physical courts, if we have to live with virtual courts, what is the reality in India, in a contextual setup as far as India is concerned? I just actually did a search on what is the IT status in Indian context. As far as 2017 figures are concerned, about 72% of the population in India do not have access to internet. Insofar as Delhi is concerned, about 2.2 crores have got internet connections. As far as Mumbai is concerned, it is little less at 1.5 crores. The whole of rural India put together has got about 27%. Now, if this is the internet connectivity statistics, and Northeast, the whole of Northeast taken together, they say it is just about 4.5 lakhs. If this is the status of internet facility that is available to our Indian public, how a virtual court hearing would be effective is for us to actually ponder over. That's number one. Number two, easier said than done. A virtual court hearing. I won't say that the lawyers are technologically challenged. I won't say that. But the infrastructure is every lawyer. There are about 17 lakh lawyers in the country today. Now, barring the lawyers who are practicing in the metro cities, if you look at a lawyer who is practicing in the municipal courts, who is practicing in the district courts, if you have to ask, does he have actually a laptop? Does he have a desktop? The answer would be a simple no. If this is the position, how do you expect actually the lawyers to conduct a virtual hearing? So therefore, the first criteria of an access to justice, that is effective adjudicative machinery, is lacking so far as even the advocate is concerned. Then the court staff, the judges, they all have to be digitally trained. The digital literacy have to be actually improved. If the digital literacy is not actually, the technical know-how is not taught to the advocates, the court staff who have to manage everything, then the whole system will have a problem. This is so far as the infrastructure part is concerned. Then the second criteria is that accessibility. The second criteria which the Supreme Court said for access to justice is easy accessibility. Now, they thought in terms of actually physical accessibility. The person should be in a position to physically access the courts. But in today's context, what to talk of physical access, even virtual access is not possible. So therefore, if the second criteria of accessibility is talked about, we are again having a serious problem that accessibility is not that easy. We are having practical problems. People who are appearing in day in and out in the Supreme Court and in the High Courts on virtual mode, in fact, lot many problems are actually being put across to the bar associations, to the friends, to colleagues, saying what all impediments that they face. During the course of hearing, the link snaps, the virtual hearing goes, the audio is not visible, the audio is not audible, video is not visible. What do we do? Again, cases where actually persons are not able to actually access. If that be the position, the accessibility becomes a big question mark. The third is speedy justice. Justice, as we all say, justice delayed is justice denied. So therefore, the third criteria for access to justice is speedy justice. Already, in fact, there is a big backlog. There is a huge backlog of RESF cases. If this is the position with the normal physical courts, what will happen when we have to actually switch over to virtual courts? As on today, on an average, about 20 to 25 cases are listed before one bench in the Supreme Court. On an average, about 4 benches or 5 benches may sit. With the vacations on, there are only about 2 benches. Similarly, in the High Courts, not every bench is sitting. Now, on an average, about 20 to 30 cases are listed, and with just about 100 cases, whereas there are about 2,000 cases used to be listed on a day. So where is the speedy justice concept that will be given effect to if virtual courts are to be implemented? Then the last criteria is affordability. Of course, affordability in terms of the client coming to Delhi to attend to his case, yes, it may be, in fact, the virtual courts may be an answer, he need not come here. But as far as the lawyer is concerned, affordability, and similarly as far as the client is concerned, affordability in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the IT infrastructure, is again not that it comes so easily. There are practical problems. If supposing today I have a case in Supreme Court and I also have a case in the Delhi High Court, now if I have to switch on that one laptop that I have, if I switch on to the link that is provided by the Supreme Court, I won't be able to access the link which is provided by the High Court. Because if I actually touch on the link of the Supreme Court, the link of the Delhi High Court will automatically get snapped. So I will have to keep changing. If I have to keep changing, I may lose out on the case. then if I have to actually keep all the links open, I will have to have more than one laptop or otherwise more than one machinery. These are all practical issues. So therefore, effective adjudication, easy accessibility, speedy justice, and affordability on all the four, that is, which are the criteria for easy accessibility to justice, is definitely not being met by the virtual courts. Of course, it is just at the inside. Should I say it is at the beginning of a virtual court system. It may take some time. Slowly, the things may improve, and by then, possibly a virtual court may be one of the answers, as Justice Jha suggested, to some of the cases. But definitely the physical courts, the concept of physical courts can't be done away with. We had an interesting case in the 1980s. You all might have come across. This was in the Supreme Court itself. Ishwar Iyer versus Registrar Supreme Court of India. Now, this is reported in 1980, 4 SCC 680. Now, the challenge before the Supreme Court was, even for the review hearings, an open physical court hearing was sought by the advocates. The challenge was, a review by circulation is not a fair hearing. It's not an open hearing. It is not a hearing in terms of the fair justice. So therefore, the courts should not permit hearing by circulation in case of review hearings. The matter came before Honorable 5 judges of the Supreme Court. Of course, they said that review is just a repetition of what has happened in the original hearing. So therefore, it is not necessary that in each and every case that review hearings also should be in open court. So this plea was dismissed. But one important paragraph I would like to actually read, and I quote. This is what the Supreme Court said about physical hearings. Experience has shown, two in fact factors are looked into by the Supreme Court. One is how the bar and bench should actually look into. Experience has shown, I quote, para 29A, experience has shown that at all levels, the bar, through the spoken word and the written brief, has aided the process of judicial justice. Justicing is an art. Even advocacy is an art. Happy interaction between the two marks for the functional fulfillment of the court system. No judicial emergency can jettison the vital breadth of spoken advocacy in an open forum, unquote. So therefore, the Supreme Court actually emphasized on two aspects. One is, whatever may be the emergency, whatever may be the condition, whatever may be the circumstance, the vital breadth of spoken advocacy cannot be actually done away with. And that also in an open forum, that is what the Supreme Court emphasized. Again, while commenting on access to justice, in para 29, I quote, access to justice is and has been recognized as part and parcel of a right to life in India and in all civilized societies around the globe. The right is so basic and inalienable that no system of governance can possibly ignore its significance, leave alone offer to deny the same to its citizens. So therefore, even way back in 1980, the Supreme Court was very clear that open court hearings is the hallmark of dispensation of justice. Of course, we are in a testing time. It is not as if that anybody can just go to the courts and start presenting his case in the present circumstances. There are serious issues. The health issues, the day actually, the way the COVID-19 is actually raising day in and out, there is a cause for concern. But certainly, certain via media have to be worked out. One, I would suggest to have access to justice, which is fair and efficient. There is not only, in fact, necessary to have virtual courts going on till such time that things stabilize, but slowly, the court should try out a physical hearing to the extent feasible. some courts can function. Some courts can function with the limited accessibility of advocates. No litigants should be permitted because the litigants effectively, when they come to the courts, they do not actually have any role because they are actually at the back seat. They would not be able in a position to contribute so far as the hearings are concerned. So therefore, one possible suggestion is that the litigants, they should be dissuaded from coming to the courts. Having achieved that, if you are able to do that, then the courts can request the advocates to minimize the number of advocates who will be entering into the portals. Whether it is the senior advocate to be assisted by an advocate on record or by another advocate of his own office, not more than 2 to 3 advocates should be permitted per case. With social distancing and also effective monitoring, I don't think that it will be a very difficult proposition for the courts actually to revive the physical hearings, at least in a limited measure, so that both the virtual hearings as well as the physical hearings can be tested in combination, and I am sure in fact it will work out. Now, so far as the virtual hearings are concerned, another concern is our own community. The virtual hearings definitely, in fact, has done serious problems to the economy of the advocates. There are far too many advocates who are not in a position to even, what to talk of, having a decent living. Even the basic necessities of day-to-day living, they are not in a position to cater for. Especially in mufusals, in lower courts, unless and until the courts open, it's very difficult for them to sustain. I had an occasion very recently when one of the advocates called me up and then said, "Sir, not that I am asking for anything, but I would request, in case if you can put it across as member of the Executive Bar Association, that please actually prevail upon the judges of the Supreme Court that they should actually see the difficulties that are being faced day in and out by the advocates, and to some extent the physical courts should resume hearing. And fortunately, the chamber judge hearings and also the registrar court hearings have been resumed, though that is also on a virtual mode. But at least to some extent, the opening of the chamber judges and also the registrar court hearings go on a virtual mode has opened up to the judges, to the lawyers who are from the junior level or from the middle level. So therefore, in times of crisis, there is definitely, in fact, a necessity for all of us to put our heads together and think in terms of improving the efficiency, both in terms of virtual courts as also the physical courts. Without this, if the COVID-19 crisis is going to stay, we are in for a long haul. There will be serious problems, and if this is prolonged, even senior advocates and even advocates who have put in a lot of experience in the profession, even they will find it difficult to keep actually the things going. And having said that, I would like, as a last point, I would like to actually emphasize on one thing. That is, the executive is working today, rather they are working overtime. Today the government machinery, whether it is the central government or the state governments or authorities, they're all working overtime. Look at the medical people. Look at the paramedical. Day in and out, they are there attending to the patients. The medical cover, they are providing at each and every place. So therefore, the executive, I must say, is working overtime. Then comes the legislature. I am yet to come across the legislature being convened, the legislative bodies being convened because of obvious reasons. That leaves us with the judiciary. The judiciary is working, but albeit on a limited scale, because of the virtual court hearings, it's only the High Court and the Supreme Court which are hearing. Some lower courts, at some places, physical courts have opened, and similarly, in some places where the infrastructure is available, even the lower courts have started functioning. But that is not at the desired level at all. So therefore, it is only the executive and judiciary which are functioning as on today. But as I said, judiciary is also at a scale much below as to what it normally does. Maybe forced by the circumstances, one have to give little amount of leeway to that also. But at the same time, we cannot afford to actually let our guards down and sacrifice our health because our practice is at stake. That also we cannot actually simply wish it away. So both the things have to be balanced in today's context. So the best suggestion, as far as what I would feel, is a combination of physical courts and a combination of virtual courts is the need of the day. And therefore, we should all try and work out as to how this can be achieved. With these words, I once again thank Durgadat and his team for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and interact with you all. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. It was an honor listening to you. Out of your vast experience, you have shared your valuable views on the importance of access to justice, which is a part of fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution of India. You have enlightened us with the challenges and future prospects of the virtual courts, which is a new reality of the present time. In such a short span of time, you have very minutely touched upon various problems associated with the virtual court system. Thank you once again, sir. I now invite our senior colleague, Mr. Karunakar Mahalik, Advocate on Record, Supreme Court of India, to give vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen,